SEGA Bits presents SEGA Talk, a podcast talking all things SEGA! With your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. Say what?
Hello and welcome to SEGA Talk. I'm Barry, with me is George.
Hello, everybody.
There he is. And on this episode of SEGA Talk, number 27, we are covering something that we actually covered before, but you never heard it. It was a lost episode. This was back before we had our shit together. And
yeah.
Now we've mounded the shit with our hands, and it's together now. We have it all. It's
barely hanging together.
Yeah, barely, but it's more in a little pile now rather than spread out amongst the floor. With that in mind, the game we're actually covering is Bug, and this was to be an April Fool's episode because it would be an episode that no one would have probably requested from us at the time. I'll be honest though, at this point I feel like this is a game that someone probably would throw at us.
For some reason, right?
Yeah, it feels like something that we would cover eventually. Maybe Snail Maze would have been a better joke episode.
Ooh.
I could talk about that for hours, but we're going to be talking about Bug for at least 6 hours on this episode. And that released in 1995 to the Sega Saturn. And surprisingly, it was a very successful platforming game. It released just a few weeks after the launch of the console in America and was developed by Real Time Associates. The game combines 2D character sprites and 3D environments to create a 2.5D platforming experience. So, what was your earliest experience with Bug?
It wasn't one of those games that I purchased for the Sega Saturn. It wasn't something that, I think at the time, I know there was a sequel to it, and I know you said it was highly successful, but, I feel like it's one of those games that kind of sold as I guess it became like a meme. Like, there's some games that you in the early 16-bit era that did this too. Like, I feel like Bubsy was one of those.
Yeah.
Where it wasn't really well designed, but the character drew you in with the cover.
Yeah.
And it was during a time when kids didn't actually look at reviews. It wasn't like you could just go on the internet and look at a review for free. You had to go buy a magazine or keep up with it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it was a success. Because the character Bug, when you look at it, you're like, oh, that just doesn't look like a bad game. It looks like a Mascot platformer. Especially in 95 when, Sonic the Hedgehog and Mario were at their peak height, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up Bubsy because I feel like I have more memories of Bubsy than Bug. And but it kind of ties in with this because I distinctly remember when I rented Bubsy, when I was seeing the commercials for it and when I rented it, I was super excited because in my mind I had played Sonic and I was like, I love the design of this character, I love the game. And then when I saw Bubsy, I'm like, this guy, he looks interesting. I like that he talks, like there's voice acting in the game, which was new at the time. And I was like really pumped to play it. Like I think I was ready to experience the next Sonic the Hedgehog. And
is that how you felt?
I just remember. Do you ever have these memories where you're like, I was super excited at the time, but it's like,
my cousin used to own the Bubsy games, so I used to go to his house and play them, and I remember being super frustrated with the level design and stuff, but I was so young that I didn't really put together what's good, what's bad. But definitely the falling damage, dying, and you had to be super careful because the design of some of the levels were really, really terrible.
Right.
And I think Bug is way better designed for me.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say I picked it up at a flea market. It used to be one of those games that you would find in the flea market for a couple bucks. Everywhere. It was almost everywhere. If somebody had a Sega Saturn lot that they were selling at a flea market or secondhand shop, Bug would be one of the games that you would always find for some reason. That one and Daytona USA and Sega Rally.
Oh, absolutely.
So definitely played it because it was cheap and picked it up because it was cheap at the time. I think now it's not as cheap, everything in the US Sega Saturn, but that's just my experience with it. I played it when it was already like the Saturn was already kind of over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have like nostalgia feelings with the character or anything. I know there's some other people out there that, it sold a lot. So obviously some people out there got it for Christmas, right?
Right. Yeah. And for my memories, like I brought up Bubsy because I don't have distinct memories of Bug at the time. I remember magazine ads. I believe I remember commercials, and I did play it probably 1998 with the demo disc, which has a very lengthy demo to the point where you play it enough that you're like, I understand that a demo is supposed to give you a taste of the game and make you decide to buy it or not, but typically back in the day, they give you just a tiny taste, and you'd be like, well, one level, I played for 2 minutes, I might pick this up, that was fun. This one, though, it goes on and on. I feel like you could play the demo for like 10 or 15 minutes, and if you don't like it, you're not going to buy the game, because I played the demo and I was like, this is kind of cool, and after a while I was like, this is kind of, I don't know, I got bored with it.
But Bug is really, like you said, right? Like Bubsy and this character, and maybe like Knack now is like the modern equivalent to this, but it's like they sold on being a platformer, but the platformer was never that great.
Right.
But they sold on the idea, right?
Right, and
like
I brought up Bubsy because I feel like if I had a Saturn at the time, I would feel that same feeling. I'd see it, get super excited, think I was going to be playing the next Sonic the Hedgehog, and then I'd get home and probably play something that was okay, but definitely something that let me down. But playing it as I did, and since then, I like it. I mean, I'm not coming in with these preconceived notions. I know about Bug. So when I started playing it, I was like, this is what I expected. And yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about the developers. So you can't talk about Bug without first talking about the history of Real-Time Associates. So 2 years before the Saturn launched in America, SEGA assembled what was dubbed the Away Team, whose task was to assemble the best possible combination of hardware and software for Western and Japanese markets. So SEGA of America placed their efforts on assembling third-party software through a hand-picked group of developers, which were nicknamed Tiger Team. SEGA's intent was to get developers to be happier and more at ease with developing for the Saturn hardware. So one member of this team was Real-Time Associates. They were founded by David Warhol, formerly of Mattel Electronics, and the studio grew from a computer, sound effects, and music creator to a full-fledged development studio with an emphasis on licensed content. So Real-Time Associates games, they included Beavis and Butthead, Ren and Stimpy and the Quest for the Shaven Yak, Barney's Hide and Seek, and nearly half of the American Sega Pico library.
I feel like these guys are your heroes, right?
I love them. So, looking at their gamography, do any of these titles stand out to you?
I mean, I don't know if you did this, but when I was younger, I think I was just more easily drawn to like licensed games because you knew them. So like I played the Beavis and Butthead game. I played the Ren and Stimpy game. I don't know which one I played though now, but I remember playing them, and this is kind of what Bug kind of reminded me of, where it was like a good enough platformer, but it was just like not amazing, not terrible, and that's how kind of like the Beavis and Butthead game and those kind of games reminded me of. It's like you like the show, this is a good enough distraction. Kind of remind me of like some of the Simpsons games they used to make, where the platforming is kind of cheap, but like, Bug's actually not that cheap, but like these licensed games were, right? They were just okay platformers, at least to me. But what are these? Have you played any of these games?
I have played. I believe I've played Quest for the Shaven Yak, and Beavis and Butthead. I rented. It was one of those things where I kind of watched the show, but not really because it was like bad for you. But it was
a bad boy show.
Yeah, but it was easier to get away with playing the game, and we've talked about this before. One of those games where you get and you're like, this is my weekend. I'm so excited. And you play the first 5 minutes and you're like, I'm not playing this all weekend.
Yeah, because it was really hard, that Beavis and Butthead game.
It was very hard. And I believe, I think there might have been like Angry Video Game Nerd or something, where they like broke down just how hard it was and how confusing it was, and things that you really would not pick up unless you maybe had a manual. But like renting it, you're not going to get a manual. So yeah. And as for the American Sega Pico library, as nobody really cares or knows, I have the entire American Sega Pico library. It's about 20 games, and the real time.
So they did about 10 games.
What's that?
They did about 10 games.
Yeah, they did about 10. They did some Disney ones, but like their skills with developing for it and figuring out new ways to use the stylus and stuff were actually pretty smart, like pretty creative. There was a Pocahontas game, I believe they did, where you would make pottery on a wheel, so you would carve the pottery as it spun with the stylus, and then the shape you would make would mirror on the other side to create a bowl. And I thought that was kind of neat. Like, they had a lot of creativity in that regard. And so I think, some of their titles really do stand out. It's interesting, too, that David Warhol worked at Mattel Electronics. Because from my memory, what's that, Intellivision, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And the studio grew, it says here, from a computer sound effects and music creator. And so I'm thinking of the Intellivision, and I know they had a voice synthesis module for a few games. And so I have to wonder, maybe they worked on that. I don't know. But that kind of got me thinking that this is a team founded by someone who is a pretty creative guy and is always looking at new ways to utilize hardware in unique ways. That's my guess.
And they, how they did all these licensed games? You could kind of tell that Bug was their version of a licensed character. Like Ren and Stimpy, Beavis and Butthead, they had these designs. It wasn't they were licensable, right? So I feel like Bug, the whole idea behind it was the same thing as Sonic, right? It's going to maybe be more than just a game. It's going to be on merchandise and stuff, right?
Right, yeah. And it's interesting you bring up Sonic, too, because, Real-Time Associates, they almost went the route of Big Red Button. And I say that because Bug actually started as a Sonic game. Sega signed a $1 million contract with the developer, which involved a year-long development cycle and a 15-person team. But unfortunately, as is the trend with Sega of America, Sega of Japan was unaware of the deal, and the idea of Real-Time Associates developing a Sonic game quickly ended. But if you can think fast forward to 2015, 2014, where Sega of America was like, no, we're doing this, Big Red Button, and they push it through. Can you imagine a game...
Sega of America game?
Sega of America game like Bug, but with Sonic actually happening. And I also have to ask, what is up with Sega of America continually trying to develop Sonic games either behind Japan's back, or they'll start it and then they'll tell Japan, and they think Japan will see it and go, oh, what a good job you did,
Behind our back?
Behind
using
our back.
Wow.
IP? Yeah, what do you think of that?
I feel like that's the American mindset, right? They make fun of this in TV shows all the time, where the guy goes behind the CEO's back, does something, and they're like, "You're hungry. You're CEO of the company now. I'm firing myself."
Yeah,
and that's how they think it's gonna play out. I think at this moment, Sega Japan really undervalued how important Sonic the Hedgehog was for Sega of America as a marketing tool.
Mm-hmm.
And they were 100% okay with leaving Sonic, because in Japan, the Sega Genesis Sega Mega Drive wasn't as popular as it was in America.
Right.
And the Sega Saturn was really popular in Japan. So whatever they were doing at that point was working. But the problem is they didn't think of the big picture, right? Sega of America has to have their slice or their selling tools. So I think they just wanted to have a Sonic game, even if it wasn't good, on the Sega Saturn, so they could have it in adverts. Let's be honest, when we were kids and we saw the next continue the Sonic 4, we'd be like, all right, Mom, I guess I'm going to have to get this for Christmas, right?
Yeah, and I think Sega of Japan, they did want to continue Sonic as a series, but at a much slower pace, which is why Sega of America were like, no, we got to get at least 2 or 3 Sonic games a year. Like, let's keep pumping these out. And they reached a point where they were, I've shown you the chart before. It shows this timeline of Sega hardware, and there was a period of 1 or 2 years where Sega worldwide were supporting every single piece of hardware from the Master System all the way up to the Saturn. And when you consider that, that's the 32X, Sega CD, Game Gear, Pico. It's just Genesis. So, it's just kind of mind-boggling. And Sega of America, I think their mindset was that every single one of these pieces of hardware, they got to have a Sonic game. And if the hardware really picks up and, gets an audience, you got to have continual Sonic games. And that's too much work for Japan, understandably. But it's also understandable that America should be given a little more control because that's where their bread and butter is. And so
it was also like, remember the Sonic Extreme, which kind of reminds me of Bug, I guess, in a way, right? Mm-hmm. The idea behind it. But like Yuji Naka and Sonic Team being also like playing the guard role where if we're not involved, we don't want anything against it. Like, I feel maybe if Sega of America talked to Sonic Team and they had somebody just overseeing it, maybe it would have gotten better reception from Sega. But like, imagine you guys, like Sega Japan and Sonic Team, being told, hey, that character that you guys created and was a phenomenon, we're going to undermine you and just make another game. And here it is. We've been working on it for a while.
Yeah.
I think everybody would get upset.
For sure. Any creator. That's the problem with the whole idea, even though it, like I was saying, it would be great for Sega of America, is that you have to have super strong quality control. Otherwise, you're going to put something out that's crap, and it's going to hurt the brand, and it's going to upset, the likes of Yuji Naka, as we saw with Sonic Boom. So, it's a difficult line to walk, and I think in this case, they made the right decision to make an original concept. And so the idea of an insect-themed game actually came from a stalled Genesis project. In real life, as a kid, Warhol, who we were talking about earlier, who founded Real Time Associates, built Lego mazes and raced beetles through them, which became a strong influence on the gameplay. Players controlled Bug through 6 worlds of 3 scenes each, moving around corridor-like platforms, jumping on enemies, keeping an eye on the health bar, and of course making the way to the end of the level. So it's pretty basic platforming gameplay, no real gimmicks. However, the idea was floated out to the team during development of an ever-decreasing health bar that had to be maintained through collecting sugar crystals, sort of like Super Sonic and his diminishing rings. So, what are your thoughts on the gameplay of Bug, and do you think the game would have improved with the decreasing health mechanic, which I do not believe was actually implemented?
Okay, no, because all you're doing is pissing people. I mean, you're making people mad. Like, that's one of the things I hate about some games. Like one of my negatives about Shenmue 3 is the decrease in health bar, right? Like, my thing is, why do you need it? Like, what is it serving? I know they have a food mechanic in that game, so they want to, like, show that. I think they should have just done, like, if you eat certain foods, you get boost. Like, you'll be better at blocking. I think that's better because then it forces you to be like, oh, I'm going to fight, but I forgot to use the food.
Yeah.
So, same thing with this one right here. It's like you're decreasing the health. It's like, yeah, but you're not really you're not developing smarter levels. Like you said, they were just okay, no gimmicks. Maybe you should have thought of a gimmick that, I don't know, makes the game more enjoyable. Adding a decreasing health bar is not making the game better. It's the same game, but now you're just making it more annoying.
Yeah, if I were to implement a gimmick, it probably would be a sort of like hovering double jump, because he is a bug, so he could flap his little wings. I'm trying to think. I mean, I know the princess in the American Mario Brothers 2, she does a little thing. What is the game where you jump, and then when you double jump, you kind of hover in the air and kind of go up a little bit before you fall? Maybe it is a Mario game. Maybe I'm thinking of Luigi, the way he operates.
With his little legs, he kind of like waddles around.
Yeah,
and I think there's also a like the cape. I guess if you do it in an angle in Ray, sort of.
Yeah, yeah. So you see, like they could have done something like that. I'm very glad they didn't do the decreasing health bar idea. I think that's a stupid idea.
Shinobi on PS2 also does the decreasing health bar, and it's so annoying.
Yeah.
Like,
and I mean, I know this isn't a Shenmue 3 Sega talk, but just to bring that up, like you said, I mean, at least it's not going down as you're just standing still. But yeah, I remember running from the furthest 2 points of that mini map that they had, and I lost like 3 bars of health, which wasn't a huge deal. But then I opened up my thing, and for a game like Shenmue that's trying to be so realistic, I just hit the A button and ate a pineapple, and like, who runs like through a little town and then has to eat 6 pineapples? Like, it seems really weird. You know?
Yeah, it's a really weird numbers. Like, I need 3 bananas in me right now.
George, what's wrong? Pineapples. You know,
it actually does decrease when you stand around. I didn't know this, but I was doing that little lap. Yeah, I did the laps video, and my health went almost all the way down by the end of the day. I mean, it's super slow, but it does happen. Yeah,
that's weird. Well, I'm glad they didn't put it in bug, but yeah, it's
just like, not creative. It's like you're looking for something to sell the game, and it's like it's a bug now with decreasing health bar. It's like, how are you going to market that?
You're really not.
Like,
yeah.
So it's not. It wouldn't improve the game. They needed something like. They needed something else, but I mean, what do we know? You did say it sold a lot. So.
Well, you know, the game is called Bug, and I mean, we'll get into the story. It's a very deep story, but the game's called Bug. Why couldn't you have a character select of like 3 different types of bugs, and each one, like Sonic, had a different skill? So you could have a bee that jumps and then does like a little like kick to the ground, you know, with his stinger, like real fast, like shoot, kind of like I don't know, like they do in fighting games. You know, like there's some creative ideas there. A spider that shoots webs, like it'd be doable.
I mean, I think the team was like rushing this out. This is like during the era where, like, I mean, I love Panzer Dragoon. I loved all the games, but like Panzer Dragoon 1 was super rushed to get it out for the launch.
Yeah.
So that's a game that definitely the sequel like those 2 games should have probably been one game, but this kind of reminds me of Bug. Like, I'm pretty sure I actually haven't played Bug 2, so I wouldn't know, but like pretty sure a lot of the ideas or levels went to the sequel.
Yeah.
To get this one out.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the story. Ooh. All right, you ready? The story for Bug is actually pretty simple. So Bug was an actor in Hollywood acting in a movie in which he must rescue his family from the evil spider Queen Cadavra. And this sort of setup of a fictional show within a game allowed for lots of fourth wall breaking, and the developers even admitted that Jerry Seinfeld was an influence on Bug's personality.
This is what we do our bad Jerry Seinfeld
What's
expression.
The deal? Yeah. No, it's no secret that Bug was a potential Saturn mascot. So did you think he had what it took to be a console mascot in general? And what are your thoughts on the storyline and the characters?
I mean, he's not as good as Sonic the Hedgehog, right? Sonic had something in the character design where it kind of like blended East and West in a way that it kind of like captured people's imaginations. Bug isn't terrible, but he's totally has that not Pixar, but DreamWorks, the raising the eyebrow look. Mm-hmm. You know, like oh, look, this character is so mischievous. He has the rock people's eyebrow. They did this with Bubsy, the one we talked about, also had that.
The DreamWorks eyes?
Yeah, the DreamWorks eyes, right?
Yeah.
It's a meme online, but yeah. Where they're all doing the rocks people's eyebrows and like trying to be mischievous, right? That's the whole idea behind this look. And they've been using this since the early 90s. I mean, even Sonic has some of the covers that do that. Especially in the West. So it as a mascot, no, but Bug had it it looked more of a Bug looked more mascotish than like Knights did. I don't think Knights look like a mascot. It's just a nice side game by like kind of like Ristar. It's a nice side game, but like no, I don't think it would have been mascot material. I think that's what they were going for though, for real. I mean, for like obvious.
Yeah,
by the look.
It seemed like with Sonic the Hedgehog, he really truly became the mascot of the Mega Drive Genesis. And Sega thought, well, moving forward, every console is going to have their mascot. So, like, Alex Kidd was Master System. You could even argue Opa Opa was kind of Master System. And so they were kind of pushing either Bug or Knights as the Saturn mascot. And then we got into Dreamcast. It was kind of Ooh La La, was kind of the Saturn or the Dreamcast mascot.
I mean, technically, Sonic was back at that point because
absolutely.
I mean, let's be honest. Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 were huge when they came out.
For sure. Yeah, and so I would argue that Dreamcast was Sonic's true return as like mascot for both the company and the console. But Saturn was a weird era where Sega was like, yeah, Sonic's a thing, but they weren't really pushing him as the mascot all that much, even though he totally was. And I don't think Bug was the right choice.
Definitely not.
I do see the Jerry Seinfeld influence. He's got like a little like kind of smirk, some like sarcasm to him, like Jerry did, and in the show specifically. And so whatever, that's fine. I don't think it dates the character. I mean, Seinfeld's still on TV.
I think. Well, yeah, I don't think I see the Jerry thing, but like, I think the reason that. I think he looked like a mascot. I think the reason he wasn't a mascot or couldn't be a mascot because I feel like when you have a mascot, that mascot has to sell the unit that you're selling, right?
Right.
And Sonic sold Genesis. Mario 64 sold Nintendo 64. But like Bug was just so like mediocre in what it was trying to do that it was never going to like... While Saturn owners bought it, I feel like a lot of Saturn owners bought the... Saturn because they were Sega fans at the time more than I bought this because Bug came out for it. Do I make sense?
No, you make total sense.
Yeah, sorry.
No, let's talk about the game. Like what were people playing when they played it? So the game was a 2.5D style, which was done mainly because the team was not ready for a full 3D game. In fact, the game utilizes only one of the Saturn's two processors. There was no hardware to create full 3D characters at the time, which is ironic given real time is in their name. Oh, I get it. There was no hardware to create full 3D characters in real time on the Saturn. I said in the notes, ironic given real time is in their name. Haha.
What is up with real time?
What's up with real time? I mean, it's not real and it's not. Okay. So the 3D rendered style was achieved through pixel by pixel drawings, scanned hand drawings, and 3D rendered textures. All characters were sprites positioned within a 3D world. Did you think this effect was a success?
No, because like I'm gonna be honest with you. When I played, and like I told you, I played it after it came out, so I guess comparing it to the Nintendo 64 is kind of like bad because there was no real 3D games like Mario at the time, but still like it wasn't 3D, so can it really compete against Mario? No. So I think that it being 2.5D and like you said drawing and stuff kind of made it look like the Saturn couldn't do what with Crash Bandicoot and other characters could do.
Yeah. Where did you find that the 2.5D maybe hindered gameplay? Did you have any trouble with it?
I didn't, but it wasn't like the greatest idea. Like you're talking about when you like go forward and backwards and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a great idea. It really did feel like a, like you said, a Sega Genesis idea that like was brought over to the Saturn.
And we've even seen that in some of the Sonic 3, like the Sonic Special stages.
Oh yeah, for sure. So to me, it feels like maybe it couldn't have been done exactly like this at this kind of high quality. But it wasn't a huge jump from generations. Like you see some games when you're like, this is obviously impossible on the Genesis, but like, or even on the 32X, like a lot of PlayStation early games that were like, Twisted Metal and stuff, like obviously that's 3D. This was obviously was like 2.5D, and like you said, they were drawing and scanning. So I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think given the sales of the game, I think the effect was a success. You know full well back then 2.5D was not something people were pushing. They would call this a 3D game outright.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we even had 2D games that I feel like people were calling 3D games, and they totally weren't. Like Clay Fighter, Donkey Kong Country, you know, like you'd see magazine, they'd probably be like, the 3D styled game. Yeah. And so, you know, it's, I think it worked. I think given the time they had and their inability to really totally use the Saturn to its full advantage, I think they did a decent job. You know, going into this next bit here, so Bug was actually the first software title for the Saturn developed in North America. And the game met its development goals and released just a few weeks after the Saturn's launch. And at the 1995 Summer Consumer Electronics Show, the game received a ton of marketing, and film director Steven Spielberg loved the game, and he famously said, "This is the character. This is the character that's going to do it for the Saturn." Well, Steven. But Bug did end up being the second best-selling Saturn game in 1995, and the best-selling software game across all platforms in Europe for 2 weeks. So, playing the game now, do you think this hype and success is a surprise to you?
I think, like, no. I think it's one of those early games where, like I said, I compared it to Knack, which is a launch title for the PlayStation 4, and it's, like, sold enough to make a sequel, and I was surprised, right? And this is kind of the same thing. You see a kind of a Sonic-looking character with the DreamWorks eyes, and you're like, all right, I'll buy it. It's only $32 anyway. I need something for my Sega Saturn. Yeah. And that's, I think, how it sold as much as it sold. Mm-hmm. And Steven Spielberg, isn't this the last time he made a good movie? No, I'm joking. This is it. Bug broke him. No. Yeah. There's like a meme that he doesn't make good movies anymore, but I don't know if I disagree with that. I haven't seen all his movies, but he was wrong about Bug, because it definitely didn't do it for the Saturn. Yeah. And we all know that Steven Spielberg is a big Sega fan, and he's a video gamer. Mm-hmm. So I'm not surprised about him having a comment about it. But are you surprised about the hype?
You know, knowing what I know now about Saturn history, I don't think I am surprised, because it was so early on that, you know, this is one of those things that happens in the first few months, first few weeks of the launch, and then it was probably quickly forgotten. I think it was overshadowed very quickly by other Saturn games, by other games of the era on other consoles, and I think people just moved on. And, you know, good for the team for meeting their goals, releasing it just a few weeks after the launch, but I don't know what their aspirations were, but if they really thought this was going to be the biggest hit on the Saturn, become like a huge series, I think that's a bit of hubris on their part. But, I mean, I think the game got more than what it probably deserved, to be honest.
It really reminded me of, like, what's that, Clockwork Knight, mm-hmm. where it's just good enough. It's like, oh yeah, I guess it's technically 3D to the onlooker, right? Right. But it's an early Sega Saturn title where they obviously were not well versed in all of the development stuff. And I'm like, what could you even do with Bug 3? Like, I haven't played Bug 2 like I said before, but wasn't Bug 2 literally just Bug 1 but with more levels?
Yeah, and we don't get too much into it because of course we're going to be doing Bug 2
obviously we have to.
But yeah, it really did kind of feel like just another level pack or something like that.
So same thing with like Clockwork Knights 2. It was like the Japanese version of this.
Right, exactly. And that's why, you know, like when I see Bug for sale, I think, well, I own Clockwork Knight 1 and 2. Do I really need Bug? You know, like they're kind of interchangeable for me. And
I will say that that Bug, the character, looks way more marketable than the Knight from Clockwork Knights. So I'll give it that.
I'd give you that. That's true. They should team up though for like a game.
Ooh, a crossover would be epic, dude.
I mean, one's a bug and one's a little toy. They're probably the same size, so
That's true. And it could be a callback from Bug, the Bug movie, the Disney one, and Toy Story.
Well, Bug the movie's coming out next year, right? Oh wait, that's
yes,
Sonic.
Hopefully,
yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. So we were saying the game was a success. It sold really well. Here's the problem, though. Bug was released at a budget price of $32.99, and this was because Sega did not expect much success.
I wonder why.
Yeah, but because of this, the return on the game was not as big as it could have been if it was like $50 or $60. And however, Real Time never had royalties in place due to their large initial contract, which, if you remember, I believe was like $1 million for the Sonic game. Remember that?
Yeah.
So following the release of Bug, Crash Bandicoot became the new platforming star in town, which led to the sequel Bug 2, which expanded the formula and took a little more risk with the 3D movement. However, it didn't do too much for the company. It didn't do much for Sega. And since the sequel, Sega has not returned to the series. And due to contracts, Sega does retain the rights to Bug. And
Woo!
Yeah, in 2008, there actually was a failed revival of Bug. It came and went. A re-release has said to be unlikely due to Real Time and Sega not having the source code. Surprise, surprise. And so, as of this year, Bug, as a franchise, is pretty much dead.
I mean, it was dead when Bug 2 came out, to be honest with you. Even if they tried to relaunch it like a decade ago, it's probably not. Like, you have a list of Sega IPs, right? You start flipping through them, you're like, Bug is going to be pretty low on that list of characters that should come back. Like, I feel like, I know people don't know this because they're just whatever. They're like, they don't get emails from Sega, like PR emails, but
yeah,
I love the Sega Ages emails that they have the rabbit, that little rabbit from the old SG-1000.
Yeah.
That they're using them in marketing materials. I love that.
Yeah.
So I think he is in front of Bug. Even though he never had a game, he was just on manuals in Japan.
Yeah.
That rabbit deserves a game more than Bug. I think Ristar, and there's like these little, like Vector Man even, if you want to get a Western created guy, right?
Isn't the rabbit's
Vector
name
Man.
like Professor Ashiban or something like that?
Yeah. He should have his own game. Why not? No, probably not a game, but like I would rather have him have a new game, and you don't have to deal with a lot of stuff than Bug, right? So to me, it's like, does he deserve more? Not really. It was just the game on the Saturn that people forgot. So my legacy of Bug is like, if you like Bug and you like the games, even they're just all right games. There's nothing wrong with having all right games. Some of my favorite games are all right games, right? There's nothing. I mean, in my opinion, I love sometimes just coming into like a simple platformer game and just putting in the work and finishing it and being like, oh, that was fun. This is one of those games, right? Like, you have a little bit of fun, you move on to the next game, but like a masterpiece, definitely not. Even on the Sega Saturn, there's a lot more games. Sorry.
I think the legacy of Bug is that it played its part. It was a very short-lived popularity, but I think between it existing or not existing, I would much rather have Bug exist. Like I'm glad it came out when it did. I'm glad people enjoyed it and it sold well. It's more on the development team and Sega pricing it, so that it kind of killed the franchise before it could begin, even though they did get a sequel done. So, I don't think it deserved more than what it got. I think the legacy of it is that it existed. Some people liked it, some didn't. But like you said, like there's nothing wrong with being an okay game. And I think on this podcast, we're always covering games that I think for the most part are actually pretty great.
That's true.
And it's rare we cover games. We've covered Sonic 06, which I would say is a terrible game.
Yeah, that's true.
Bug, though, I think of all the games we looked at, that's the most like middle of the road. Like if I were to compare that to all the other games and had a scale of 1 to 10, Bug would be right there at the 5. You know what I mean? Not bad, not great. It existed. Good for Bug. You know? And if someone out there listening to this like loves Bug, like don't be upset. Like, I'm glad you love it. Like, there are games that I'll talk about that I love, and people are like, oh, that thing, that's like 6 out of 10, you know, like throw you a review score in your face. Famously, we don't talk about it that much anymore, but Viking, from, who did that?
The 3 Vikings, is that the one you're thinking about?
No. Viking Battle for, no, the one.
Oh, Battle for Asgard.
Yeah.
It's just an okay game. I mean, it had potential. Yeah. At the time, I supported it because it had like ideas behind it where you're like, man, if they expanded this and they had more time, it was super rushed. And that's sadly a lot of these kind of games where you're like, man, it would have been great if they had another year to work on it, right?
Exactly. And, you know, it kind of reminds me of Bug in that regard. And I remember very early on, you and I, we both bonded over our kind of so like of it. We were like, yeah, it was good. You know, like, it was fun.
I felt like a lot of people were bashing it, just like, I guess it wasn't the perfect game, no, but like I think a lot of people downplayed a lot of the ideas the game brought forward at the time.
Absolutely. And, you know, I never made notes on what came of Real Time Associates, but I'm sure they're doing all right. I'm sure they've had pretty good careers. I mean, looking at the work that Dave Warhol has done, he hasn't done too much since. He did a game called Soul Trapper, Episode 1, Ollie Ollie Oxenfree, in 2009, which was released to iPhone, surprisingly by Real Time Associates. And I guess they still exist.
Do they?
In a sense. Yeah. So in 1999, Real Time Associates actually was sold to Amaze Entertainment, and they are currently living on as Griptone Games, a subsidiary of Foundation 9 Entertainment. And if you remember Griptone Games, they sound very familiar, don't they?
Not to me, they don't. I don't know what they did.
Games. Man, this is going to bother me. Griptonite.
Sounds like something that like would kill Superman, or like a hand job he would get, or something like Griptonite. It's like, no!
Well, Foundation 9 Entertainment, they've worked on... Digital Sumo. That's what it is. Sumo Digital is a... So, Griptonite and Digital Sumo are actually owned by the same company, which is kind of interesting.
It's so crazy. They have a website, but the website is like super old. You might really love it, since you know. You could even send your resume.
I should. They'd probably hire me. And so that kind of does it for our talk about Bug. I should give a shout out. A lot of this information came from Ken Horowitz's Playing at the Next Level, A History of American Sega Games. If you know Ken, he's from Sega 16. Awesome guy, great website, great resource. I mean, to be honest, we probably wouldn't have said all this stuff about Bug without his book. And so we're going to do something a little throwback to the early Sega talks. We're going to talk about other media that came out in this era. Typically, we talk about the great movies and games because of Bug. I know we're not saying it's a bad game, but we're going to talk about bad movies. So here's just a little list of the bad movies that came out in 1995. We got Showgirls.
I don't know if this is bad, but you watched this movie back then? It was kind of like NC-17, wasn't it?
That was the big thing. I mean, it was a bad movie, but people were like, you get to see boobs.
That's true. That was the rarity.
It was the woman from Saved by the Bell, right? So
was it? Oh, yeah, man, I didn't know that.
The one with the teeth. That one. Yeah. Powder.
I've never seen that movie. What's that about?
That is with the guy who played young Indiana Jones on the TV show, and it was about a guy who was the people with super white skin. man, I can't remember, but like they burn
Europeans.
easily. Yeah.
Europeans.
Yeah, sure. And yeah, it wasn't terrible, but it was kind of like, oh wow, he's gonna burn if he gets sunlight on him. And then the movie Species. Do you remember that
one? Yeah, I remember that because I remember like everybody that I knew were like, you could see this woman's vagina, or we would say that.
A common trend with these 95 movies. And
right?
then
they're all sexy. What's up with that?
And then the big one, Waterworld.
I've never seen that movie, but like it's in reference in every comedy movie at the time. Like if they were doing pop culture references in this, it's like it's like shitty Waterworld. That's
you should check it out. It's not terrible. Like it's a cheesy action movie. It's like Mad Max but on the water.
Oh,
and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not like underwater. It's like on water, jet skis, boats, like handmade things, stuff like that. So
it's not. Is it like cheesy enough for like you and your friends to like laugh at the movie and have a good time?
Absolutely. I mean, the movie itself feels like a FMV game cinematic, but like with a huge budget.
Damn.
Like a weird FMV game.
So it's like if like Night Trap got a $200 million budget or what?
Yeah, pretty much. And I mean, Dennis Hopper's the villain. He's awesome in it. And if I remember correctly, the bad guy group are called the Smokers because they have like the world's supply of cigarettes, so they're always smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, the good old days.
Yeah, I think that was the plot. And they drink pee. I know that. So, I mean, who doesn't? And then we've got the 1995 game. So Waterworld, they had a video game. I believe famously it was on the Virtual Boy.
Ooh, the Virtual Boy is known for quality titles, so that's going to be good, right?
Yeah, and with the red graphics, the oceans look like seas of blood. So that's cool.
Should have been in the real movie.
We also got Wild Woody.
Oh, yes. Isn't this game rare now?
Yeah, some streamer played it, and the game now goes for like $100. I saw it in Philadelphia for $125. And
it was a game that like nobody cared about.
Yeah, I know, and I bought it 2 years ago for like $20. And the only reason I bought it was because I believe his name's Adam did a video for us on our channel. You can find it. It was called Hit Reset.
Yes.
And the whole idea was going back and reassessing these classic games. But the big deal was that he got the voice actor for Wild Woody to return and play the characters. So on our channel, we have the only like return appearance of Wild Woody. So that's something that happened.
Yeah.
We've got Slam City with Scottie Pippen.
Is this? Have you played Slam City before?
No, it's one of the Sega CD 32X titles you can get. It's also Sega CD, but
it's a FMV game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an FMV game, and it's the one I don't own that works on the works with the 32X, like extra power. It doesn't look that great. It looks pretty bad.
Oh my god! Even and that same guy. Okay, so I went into images. And he calls himself Gunstar Hero 777 on YouTube. But he did a review of Slam City, so his image pops up. So I think it's funny. I think it's funny that we're talking about him with the Wild Woody review on our channel.
Yeah.
And he also, I guess he's into these bad games from the 90s, right? Like mid 90s. That's his thing.
I think his thing is that he gets hooked on like peripheral. So he's been playing I think Game Gear games a lot recently, but he was hooked on like Sega CD for a while. You should check his stuff out if you're listening to this or watching this. He's got some cool stuff.
He also streams on Twitch, so you guys can check him out on there for sure. He does I think more Twitch stuff now than he does anything.
He's a good guy. I hung out with him at the Galloping Ghost not too long ago.
And Tomcat Alley?
Yeah.
Did you play
Save
this
the
one?
best for last.
Obviously. Have you played this?
No. It's another FMV game, I believe. And it's one of those games where it's just like, you're flying a jet, but clearly it's like, oh no, we're going towards a mountain probably. And it's like, turn right. I've watched videos of it.
I love the fact that right now I'm looking at one of the images of the intro, and it's like there's 3D holograms of mountains and stuff where the level is going to be, and then like a bunch of like army people standing around discussing the mission. Yeah. My thing is like, do you think this is what Trump does and all these presidents? Like they sit in a room like this with glowing monitors and all around them like that? Like,
I'm certain.
You think that's like legit, or you think it's more like casual than that?
They probably are like looking at an iPad, something like that.
I just think it's funny that like they all dress up in suits. Like I always want to see them like just show up in like gym shorts and like a t-shirt. They're like, all right, we got this war going on. I want to be comfortable if I'm going to be in here.
Didn't Bill Clinton do that? He was like always super casual.
Man, I hope more people are like that. Why do you want to wear suits all the time, dude? I'm very surprised that Donald Trump wears suits, to be honest with you. Seeing how casual he is on Twitter and all that.
What happened to this podcast?
Sorry. I was just looking at the
fine.
Photos. Sorry.
Yeah.
Out of all these games, I would probably play something like Wild Woody. I think it's funny that Scottie Pippen had his own game, and then Michael Jordan had his own game. When I think last time we recorded and it didn't happen, I was talking about how the Michael Jordan game I owned growing up, the something in the wind, Michael Jordan and the Windy City or something like that. It's like a platformer game where you get basketballs. Oh no, I think it's a Chicago game, right? Because he was in the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
But you basically have to kill It's a platformer where you shoot basketballs at them, and then like you get like fire basketballs and like freezing basketballs. It's so ridiculous. But like, I don't know. It's kind of weird that all these like stars got these like, oh, you want Scottie Pippen? You want a FMV game? Sure. It's Michael Jordan. You want a platformer game? All right. It's like, I don't know. It's just the
Holy
era.
crap! You're right.
Michael
Jordan. Chaos in the Windy City.
There you go. That's it, dude. I used to own this game as a kid. My mom probably got it because it was like super cheap on discount or something. But like I used to own that game. It was I had it on the Super Nintendo. I'm pretty sure. I think there was a Sega Genesis version though.
I gotta get this.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth it. It's not the most terrible game. Obviously, it is like. From the era, it's not amazing, it's not terrible, it's just whatever. But yeah, I used to play that game. I just think it's funny that Slam City by Scottie Pippen, like Scottie Pippen to me, it was like, what is it, like Walmart version of Michael Jordan?
Yeah. And so in that regard, what, Bug is the Walmart version of Sonic?
Yeah. So that's a great way to end this podcast.
Yeah. So
since we did this like surprisingly, we don't really have any comments to read, but I do have a message to tell you guys. Yeah. You guys could, if you guys are just watching this and you guys haven't subscribed, you can subscribe on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. We're also on YouTube where you can see this as a video, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. And if you want to support the show, you can support us on patreon.com/SegaBits. Anything you want to tell the people before we close it up?
Join us next time for a much more exciting game.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're a patron, you could tell us what game to talk about next time. And you could just tell us in the comment anywhere. Somebody said Puyo Puyo, so maybe a Puyo Puyo game is basically Doctor's robotic mean bean machine episode, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.